So we're now going to just watch the second video. I'll let it play and we'll then discuss the different parts after that.
The iris. This is the coloured part, the coloured ring that sits behind the cornea. The hole in the middle, which is black, is called the pupil. The iris regulates the amount of light coming into the eyes. If it's too bright or when focusing, it becomes smaller and therefore protects the eye from brightness. And when it's dark, the eyes need more light, it becomes dilated and bigger. Behind the iris is the lens. The lens can become more fatter or convex to help focus the light when reading. The lens stops working properly for most people after the age of 40, and therefore they will need glasses for reading. Light from a faraway object comes into the cornea, bends a little bit, and then bends a little bit more through the lens and focuses itself exactly on the retina, the light sensitive part of the eye. This scene shows how things are blurry far away for some people who are myopic or nearsighted. The light is being focused not on the retina but a little before the retina. This can be because the eye is too long. The next picture shows a hyperopic eye where things close by are blurrier than things far away. The focus point is behind the eye. The eyeball is a bit too short, nothing that a pair of glasses can't fix.
So the iris of each and every single person is unique in colour and in structure, and that's why sometimes some companies now they use iris recognition in the biometrics, and with some people they do have problems with their iris as well. Bits of the iris can be missing, iris coloboma, and then this causes problems with brightness. Person might require sunglasses to be worn all the time just so that the eyes are protected from the sunlight. So it is a very important structure in our eyes. Now, if we continue talking about the bit that was mentioned in the video regarding the short-sightedness. So myopia is, as was mentioned in the video, when things are blurry far away because the image gets focused in front of the back of the eye. And 1 in 3 people in the UK are myopic, so it's quite a large number. And this number is increasing. The statistics are showing that by 2050, the level of myopia will be 50% of the population. So what's fueling this? Environmental factors mostly. So studies are showing that people are spending far too much time indoors looking at things close up, and their eyes are not getting a chance to look at things far away. The eyes are not relaxing, and that's why, and the eyes are not getting enough sunlight, so that's why myopia is on an increase. So I do advise most of my patients, especially the patients who are under the age of 20, their eyes are still growing. Your eyes grow mostly from when you're born to age 3 or 4. That's where the biggest spurt of growth happens. From 17 millimeters, the focal length of the eye is 17 millimeters when you're born, and then it increases to close to adult levels at the age of 3 or 4, and then it continues to grow up to the age of 20. So I do advise that group of patients, especially that they try to go outdoors every day and they try to take regular breaks from their screens and from their laptops especially, etc. And hopefully that will help with the with myopia not developing, or with myopia not increasing as fast. So myopia is because either the eye is too long, as you can see on the diagram on the right hand side, or because of the curvature of the front of the eye, the cornea. If it's too curved, then this also causes the light to become focused in front of the retina. Okay, and that's why when a person has laser eye surgery, it's the cornea that the surgeon, it's the cornea that is flattened by the surgery in order to bring the focus point back onto the retina. And for most people, as I said, as the eye grows from when you're born to the age 3 or 4, the focus point remains on the retina because an amazing process occurs. As the eye grows, the front of the eye, the cornea, the lens, the power of the cornea and the power of the lens, it flattens and it reduces slightly to counterbalance the eye growing in a process known as emmetropization. Amazing process, and it's very, very, very minute changes in the dimensions of the cornea, in the curvature of the cornea, which allow this to occur. And because of that process, things stay focused. And it's when something goes wrong with that process, that's when a person ends up myopic. So let's look at what kind of values of change cause blurry vision. So a person, if his eye was longer than it should be by just 1 millimeter, then a person will have a prescription of -3 diopters, which is not a big prescription, but it is quite blurry. So you can see from the right hand side picture that a person on the test chart in the optician's test room normally sees something like that with a -3. So it is quite blurry, okay? And so that shows you that the eyes have been created very precisely, and throughout our lives that precision remains, and it is only the Almighty Allah, who's the best of creators, فَتَبَارَكَ اللَّهُ أَحْسَنُ الْخَالِقِينَ, that all blessings are from Him, from Allah, the best of the creators, the best of the designers, that He creates in perfection and then He maintains that perfection for us. So those people that have glasses, they should thank. Those people that don't wear glasses should be thankful to Allah that He's allowed them to see without glasses and He hasn't made their vision blurry. And those people that do wear glasses, they should also thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because as you can see from this next slide, 18% of the world who are blind because they don't have glasses. So it's something that could be very easily reversible. And also, together with that figure on the right hand side, 39% of the world who are blind because of cataract. Again, another reversible condition which can be solved with a small minor operation. So let's talk about cataract. So cataract is when the lens of the eye clouds and becomes more opaque, and this happens as a person gets older. So when you're born, the lens is completely clear in both of your eyes, but as a person gets older, normally it becomes cloudy, and if it becomes too cloudy, then an operation is required. So 1 in 3 people in the UK will normally require a cataract operation, and normally if a person smokes as well, you're twice as likely. A smoker is double at risk of getting a cataract, and also diabetes is also a risk factor. So 1 in 3 people who are diabetic will require a cataract at some point. So it's the surgery itself is the most cost-effective surgery procedure in terms of quality of life restored on the NHS, because it's a quick operation, it's simple, and it's very successful. No stitches are required. A person can walk in with very, very poor vision and can walk out from surgery being completely back to normal again. So it is something that's a benefit to us in the developed world, that we have this option of, if somebody develops a cataract, they can get it done very quickly, very easily. But those in the developed world, like I said, the 38% was it, the figure, who are blind and who are blind because they can't have this operation done. So there are many companies, many charities that organize these cataract operations, I would highly recommend that we donate some money and we get involved in these activities, in these operations that would give back the poor people, give them back their sight. So the operation is where a probe is inserted into the eye, and only a incision of 2 millimeters is made, and the cataract lens is emulsified, and then the contents are aspirated from the eye, vacuum from the eye, and then a artificial lens is inserted through a tube, and the lens is folded so it fits into a small hole, and the artificial lens is put inside the eye, and it opens up and gives the person clear vision again. Let's just watch the next video. We're going to talk about the back of the eye.
Symptoms including double vision and headaches. The two eyes working together is what gives us our depth perception. Our eyes move thanks to 6 muscles in each eye. Problems with these muscles can give rise to many symptoms including double vision and headaches. The two eyes working together is what gives us our depth perception. When the image is focused on your retina, the light photons trigger off nerve impulses that travel via the optic nerve to the brain for processing. The retina is full of photoreceptors that are sensitive to different wavelengths of light. Our eyes can see up to 7 million colours due to the photoreceptor cells known as the cone cells. The cone cells are of 3 types: red, green and blue. Most of these cone cells are packed together in an area of the eye known as the fovea. This is what gives us sharp, detailed central vision. The rod cells are responsible for vision in dim light and are mainly found in the peripheral retina. Detail is not needed in our side vision as much as the center, so rod cells will suffice there. The information travels via the optic nerve to the brain, where it is processed at the back of the brain. Eventually, a completed image reaches consciousness somewhere in the brain which is yet to be identified.
So you can see from the next diagram that there's a cable, an optic nerve, which takes all the messages from the eye to the brain, and it is the back of the brain, the occipital lobe, in which the information is processed. And like I also mentioned, 80% of what we learn, it comes through our eyes. So it is important that we do control our eyesight. So whatever we look at will have an impact directly on our heart. Whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we use our senses for, they affect our heart, and then it is our heart which becomes affected and which allows us to do good or bad actions. Comes in a hadith, إن في الجسد مضغة إذا صلحت صلح الجسد كله وإذا فسدت فسد الجسد كله ألا وهي القلب. That in the body there is a piece of flesh. If it is good and it is healthy, then the whole body is healthy, and if it is corrupted, then the whole body is corrupted. So because our eyes are a massive gateway to our hearts, it is important that we look at those things what Allah wants us to look at, and we also avoid the things Allah wants us to look at. And also, I forgot to mention when I was mentioning the tears, that tears are not only good for our eyes physically, but they are also good for our akhirah. A person who cries in the fear of Allah, it is mentioned in the hadith that a person who cries in the fear of Allah, then he will be saved from the, will not enter hell until milk goes back into the udder. So we should invoke ourselves to cry, soften our hearts, especially when making dua. It is mentioned about Thabit al-Banani, rahmatullah alayh, a famous tabi, that he used to cry so much, and in the daytime he used to fast, and in the night time he used to pray tahajjud all night. When he became old, his eyesight was about to go he was about to go blind. And he went to the doctor. The doctor said, I have a solution. You need to stop crying. And then he turns round to the doctor and says, فَمَا خَيْرُهُمَا إِن لَمْ تَبْكِيَا. That what good are these two, meaning the two eyes, if they don't cry? Yeah. So it is for a Muslim that he should cry in the fear of Allah, that he should have a soft heart, and he should cry when he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So carrying on with the next slide. This is what an optician sees when he looks into the eyes through the pupil. So that's the side view, that's the front view. This is a view of the back of the eye. The retina is visible together with the blood vessels. So it is the only place in the body where blood vessels can be seen without cutting your skin. So it's a very good indication of a person's general health of his blood vessels. It's a very good indication of how the blood vessels are in the rest of the body. Yeah. So diseases like diabetes, like blood pressure, yeah, these things will show up in the eyes. And also the retina, which is the thin layer covering the back of the eye, 0.5 millimeters in thickness, is also the only part of the central nervous system that can be viewed from the exterior. So any disease that affects the brain, any diffuse disease that affects the brain, will show up and can show up in the eyes. Yeah, so things like multiple sclerosis usually show up in the eye. Yeah, the optic nerve becomes swollen. So having your eyes tested and having the back of the eyes seen to is quite important in terms of preserving not only your eyes but also the general health of a person. Okay, so the back of the eyes contain 125 million photoreceptors. Photo meaning light, receptors meaning sensors. So 125 million photoreceptors in a space that's as big as a large stamp. So the full retina from one side to the other is 33 millimeters. So, and the cone cells, as was mentioned in the video, are responsible for our color vision. There's 9 million of them, and they're mostly located in the fovea. There's an area which is responsible for our central vision. As you can see, an area equivalent to 1.2 millimeters in diameter, and that's where most of the cone cells are packed. And these 125 million photoreceptors, the information from them goes down nerves and goes out through the optic disc towards the brain. So how many axons or nerves or wires, if you want to call them, are inside the optic nerve? You can see that it's mentioned 1 million axons are in this cable. So an area, the width of the disc is just 1.75 millimeters, yeah? The thickness of a thick credit card. So it's an amazing feat of engineering from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's fitting 1 million wires into such a small area. And that's why if a person does get damage to the optic nerve, if any of these nerves get damaged, there's no way of reattaching these axons because they're so minute and so small and so sensitive that once damaged, there's no way of reconnecting them. And I personally think even in the future, yes, we've had heart transplant, a person can even have a corneal transplant, but there will never be a time in history, according to my limited knowledge, that a person will be able to have a full eye transplant, in which if somebody's eye was completely detached, the optic nerve was cut off, where he or she could get his eyes reattached again. I don't think that's going to be possible. Yeah. However, there is a person in history that has had his optic nerve reattached. I'll give you a few seconds to think about who that might be. I'll come back to you guys for an answer for that in a minute. In the meantime, we'll just look at the next slide. There's 125 million receptors, but the optic nerve only has 1 million axons. So that's telling you that some data compression is happening, and that there is some processing of the data on the retina itself, because there's only 1 million axons and there's 125 million receptors. So again, we don't have time to go into how all that works, but it's quite complicated and very again, another proof that the person who designed this, is divine, must be a higher being. This cannot happen through something, as they say, evolution or a natural selection process. So coming back to my question, well, I'll give you one more slide there. You can see the million nerve fibers there in the diagram. That's a side view of the optic disc. Okay, and the optic disc is also an area where the only area in the back of the eye that doesn't have any photoreceptors. So there's actually a blind spot in our vision. In everyone's vision, there's a small area which is blind. However, our brains, when they process the information from our eyes, they actually cover up that defect, so we don't notice the blind spot. Again, an amazing blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imagine a person has a screen at work he uses every day, and there's a large area of pixels missing on his screen. How much that would bug him. Or imagine when you were driving and the blind spot wasn't covered up, our brains weren't able to cover the blind spot, then it would cause a problem when driving as well. And also what happens is the visual field of one eye overlaps the visual field of the other eye, and that also helps to cover the blind spot. So you can see from the next diagram that there is a blind spot where there's no photoreceptors, and you can see as well where the fovea is where the highest number of cone cells are. So coming back to the original question, who is the only person to have had a successful eye reconnection or transplant? Have anybody got an answer? Okay, so I've given you a clue there. Mount Uhud. So in the Battle of Uhud, a Sahaba by the name of Qatada bin Nu'man Ansari radiallahu anhu, his eye was hit by an arrow, and the eyeball fell out from its socket and onto the cheek of this Sahaba. And he came, and the optic nerve must have been detached, and the muscles of the eyes as well, the 6 muscles would have been detached at this point. For it to come out onto your cheek, there would have been a full detachment. So he comes to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Messenger of Allah, with his blessed hands, he puts the eye back into the socket, and a reconnection takes place through the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That it was mentioned, فَكَادَتْ أَحْسَنَ عَيْنَيْهِ وَأَحَدَّهُمَا, that later on this eye that was reinserted by the Prophet ﷺ, it became the better of the 2 eyes, and also was the one that was the sharpest. Okay, that was just a side point. Okay, so in the UK, when I see people in my practice, these are the things that normally cause problems in vision, blindness. So in the UK, 50% of blindness occurs because of macular degeneration, 18% glaucoma, and 17% diabetic retinopathy. So the diabetic retinopathy, actually, in my practice, it's a little bit more than that 17%, because, as I mentioned before, that somebody who has a South Asian background is much more likely to be diabetic, 6 times more likely in fact. So I'll mention that when I go over diabetes in a couple of slides, but we'll go over glaucoma first. So glaucoma is a disease which affects 1 in 40 over the age of 40. It's where the optic nerve, which takes all the messages from the eye to the brain, is where the optic nerve gets damaged. Okay, there's 2 types, open angle and closed angle. I'm going to mention just the open angle, the most common type, which is where the optic nerve gets damaged very, very slowly over a long period of time, usually because of high pressure in the eye, which builds up, and then the high pressure compresses these nerves, strangles these nerves, and the nerves die slowly. And the pressure is such for most people that it's not discernible by the patient. So this damage is happening very slowly without a person realizing. So it's a silent blinder, basically. So a person that's over the age of 40 is much more likely to get this condition. It's very rare under the age of 40 for somebody to have open-angle glaucoma. So the optician will normally recommend anybody over the age of 40 to have this check done, where we check the pressure in the eye. If the pressure is high, we can refer a patient to the hospital and they can get drops that will reduce that and stop any more damage happening. Okay. Also as well, there's other tests that the optician does, like a visual fields test, which checks for side vision damage. And also, when the optician looks into the back of the eye, he can see the optic nerve. So you can see here in the diagram, the optic nerve on the right hand side, there's a lot of nerves missing. So the optician would recognize that that's an eye that has got glaucoma, and the one on the left side is a healthy eye. The optic nerve looks healthy. So the next slide is going to show you what a person that has glaucoma, what they see. So they have something called tunnel vision, and the side vision, it deteriorates very slowly. Okay. And by the way, there's a strong family history link as well. So if a person does have an immediate member of family that has glaucoma, they should get their eyes tested. And also people with an Afro-Caribbean background are 4 times more likely to get glaucoma than somebody else. Okay. Next one, diabetic retinopathy. Okay, so retinopathy is where damage happens to the retina, and in this case due to diabetes. So diabetes affects 5 million people in the UK. 1 in 16 people have diabetes, and as I said before, 6 times more likely for a person who's of South Asian origin to get diabetes. So the high sugar levels inside the body, inside the blood vessels, they damage small blood vessels, especially the ones in the eyes. Okay, and the blood vessels, they start leaking blood and other fluids. The retina swells up, and it can result in cloudy vision and can even result in blindness. Like I said, maybe I mentioned that statistic or not, but it's diabetic retinopathy is the leading cause of blindness in the Western world in the middle-aged group. Okay, so if a person is diabetic, then they need to take this seriously. They need to get their eyes checked regularly, and they also need to control their diabetes. So one of the reasons that's been given for South Asians having a high percentage of diabetes is because of their diets, their lifestyle. The lifestyle is where the diet includes a lot of sugar. So a person can control diabetes in most cases, especially when the cause is due to food intake. So if a person does want to preserve his eyes, very important that he or she controls their diet. The next disease that we see in the practice that causes blindness, well, the leading cause of blindness is called macular degeneration. There's 2 types, one called dry, which is the most common type, and one is wet. So I'll just explain what dry macular degeneration is. So the macula is the area which is responsible for our central vision, which I showed you on one of the previous slides. So over here you can see the yellow dots called drusen on the macular area. So as a person ages, usually the macular region becomes thinner and tiny clumps of protein, drusen, appear, and this makes a person get this causes reduced vision, especially in the central area. Okay. As I mentioned before, the macula, the retina is very active. The metabolism is very high. The eyes are constantly working. So as a person gets older, the waste substances that are produced at a microscopic level, at a cellular level, for some reason, the efficiency is reduced, and a person gets this macular degeneration. Okay, 5% over the age of 65 get this condition, and unfortunately, there's no cure for it. As we speak, there's no cure for this condition. So if a person does start having damage to their vision done through this condition, then there's nothing that can be done. So how do we prevent this from happening? There are certain things that are risk factors. So for example, smoking. If you smoke, you're four times more likely to get this. Okay, and also a person, he should have green foods in his diet. So things, fruits, vegetables, spinach, kale, which have green color in them, because the things that have green color normally have an ingredient called lutein in them, which has been linked to reducing macular degeneration. And as I said to you, there's another type called wet macular degeneration. So this is where blood vessels grow behind the macula and they start leaking, and they can damage vision rapidly. So the dry type happens over many years. It happens very slowly, progressively, and then that can convert sometimes in a few cases to wet, where a blood vessel appears behind the macula, starts leaking, and the vision can overnight literally become reduced. So if a person does have dry macular degeneration and he or she does see blurriness in their vision, straight lines appearing bent, then he or she needs to go immediately to the optician or to the hospital to get it checked out. Because for the wet type, there are treatments available which would stop further damage occurring. Okay, so coming towards the end of our talk now, that's a scene of what a person with macular degeneration sees. So you can see the central vision is blurry. It's not a nice condition. And just before I finish my talk, I just wanted to mention certain things we can do to preserve our eyesight. So why would a person want to preserve their eyesight? Obviously, for obvious reasons. A person uses their eyes for good, and a person came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, who is the best of people? He ﷺ said, Man tala umruhu wa hasuna amaluhu, that the one who had a long life and he did good actions in that life. So he had a long life, wa hasuna amaluhu, and his actions were also good. So a person can only have a long life if he looks after himself, if he has good health, if he has good eyesight. And he can only do good deeds if he has good health. As we know, when a person becomes ill and doesn't have good health, even if he wants to do good action, it's difficult for him to do it. So we need to preserve our bodies. It's an amana from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's a ni'mah from Allah. So our deen gives us two things in order to preserve our bodies and our eyes. That is dua and dawa. Dua and dawa. Dua, to ask Allah, to beseech Allah. Why? Because He is musabbibul asbab. He is the one who, at the end of the day, is the one who makes the final decision regarding all matters. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our du'as that, oh Allah, preserve my eyes, preserve my body, give me a strong body, and keep it in afiyah until the day I die. There's du'as of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he has taught us, many du'as. And if we were to use the du'as of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then there will be more effect in that. So one of the du'as that a person can read, it's a long dua, but a person reads after the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to read this dua at the end of gatherings. So I'm not going to mention the full dua, but I'm going to mention the part which mentions the eyes. So in that dua, there's a part that says, Allahumma matti'na bi asma'ina wa absarina wa quwwatina ma ahyitana. That Allah grant us benefit from our hearing, from our eyes, and our power up until, as long as you keep me alive, as long as you keep us alive. So we should use the du'as of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They are very powerful, and he sallallahu alaihi wasallam, many different times of the day, he sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught us to pray such and such du'as. They are there. They will give us barakah in our actions, in our body parts. Okay, and together with du'a, we make dawa. Yeah, Allah has made this world darul asbab. Yeah, we have to use the means. Yeah, and after we've used the means, then we make du'a. So what are the means? Just in summary, a couple of points. One, regular eye tests are important, especially if you're over the age of 40, especially if you've got a family history of diabetes, or you're diabetic, or you've got a family history of glaucoma. Regular eye tests, as we've seen, will pick up many problems at an early stage. Even for kids as well that are under the age of 7, to have regular eye tests will pick up things like lazy eyes, will pick things up like myopia up quickly, rather than the teacher picking it up at a later date, and they've already run behind the school. So a person should take advantage of that. Number 2, smoking is a major cause and a risk factor in many of the conditions mentioned. Yeah, so a person needs to stop smoking. He can seek help from his doctor. He can seek help through other channels as well. It may require counselling, but if a person is really adamant and really motivated that he wants to look after himself, he wants to protect his eyes, then if he smokes, or he or she smokes, then they definitely need to cut smoking out. Number 3 is to eat a healthy diet. Yeah, especially things that include vitamin A, vitamin C, E, zinc, copper, and lutein. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, these things can be very helpful in preventing macular degeneration. And there are eye vitamins that you can buy as well that include these ingredients. So if you have got a history, if you have started to get macular degeneration, or you've got a family history of it, and you're not eating in your diet, then you can buy these tablets. Speak to your optician and they can advise you. Just to finish my talk off, we've seen how the eye works, and we've seen that anybody with even a minute amount of real sense would conclude that the eyes are no less than a miracle. Yeah, and that the designer and creator must be the one true God. Yeah, even Charles Darwin, the founder of the theory of evolution, he mentions in some of his writings, I'm just going to quote what he says regarding the eyes. He says, to suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus at different distances and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection, seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest possible degree. I repeat the last bit he said, I freely confess it is absurd in the highest possible degree. So even people like Charles Darwin recognize that the eye could not have been formed by natural selection. But then later on in his writings, he mentions that we need to believe that it occurs because, like I said, these people have an ulterior motive. They want to take Allah out of the equation. They want to take out accountability out of the equation. Okay? And also, in our Islamic teachings, we understand that blindness of the eyes is a loss of a massive blessing and ni'mah. However, the real loss and the real blindness is a person who is blind to the truth. And therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in different places of the Quran regarding this as well. He mentions in one place, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أفلم يسيروا في الأرض فتكون لهم قلوب يعقلون بها أو آذان يسمعون بها فإنها لا تعمى الأبصار ولكن تعمى القلوب التي في الصدور. That do they not travel in the earth so that they have hearts to understand with or ears to hear with? Meaning the people, if they were to travel in the earth, the Quraysh, if they were to travel in the earth, they would see by looking at what happened to the previous nations, they would see by looking at the earth and the signs around them that there's a greater being at work here. And then Allah mentions, فَإِنَّهَا لَا تَعْمَى الْأَبْصَارِ. So it is not the eyes that are blind, rather blind are the hearts which are in the chest. Yeah, meaning the heart is blind from the truth. So Allah is saying as well here that true blindness is blindness of the heart. And that's why in Tafsir Qurtubi, Mujahid rahmatullahi alayhi says, لِكُلِّ إِنسَانٍ أَرْبَعُ أَعْيُنٍ, that every human being has 4 eyes. Yeah, he's not talking about glasses here. He's talking about something else, which he's going to explain now. عَيْنَانِ فِي رَأْسِهِ لِدُنْيَاهُ وَعَيْنَانِ فِي قَلْبِهِ لِآخِرَتِهِ. That he has 2 eyes in his head for the dunya, and he has 2 eyes in his heart for the akhirah. فَإِنْ عَمِيَتْ عَيْنَا رَأْسِهِ وَأَبْصَرَتْ عَيْنَا قَلْبِهِ فَلَمْ يَضُرَّهُ عَمَاهُ شَيْئًا. That if a person is blind, his eyes are blind, the eyes in his head are blind, but the eyes of his heart are seeing, then the blindness of the dunya, the blindness of his physical eyes, yeah, فَلَمْ يَضُرَّهُ عَمَاهُ شَيْئًا, his blindness will not cause him any damage whatsoever. Yeah, in the hereafter, like Abdullah ibn Maktoum radiallahu anhu, a blind Sahabi, yeah, he was blind in the dunya, but he has the highest levels of paradise in Jannah. Yeah, it will not damage him, it will not affect him in any way. Yeah, and وَإِنْ أَبْصَرَتْ عَيْنَا رَأْسِهِ وَعَمِيَتْ عَيْنَا قَلْبِهِ فَلَمْ يَنْفَعْهُ نَظَرُهُ شَيْئًا. And if his eyes of the dunya are sighted, he can see with his eyes of the dunya, but blind is the eyes of the heart, then this seeing of the eyes of the dunya, فَلَمْ يَنْفَعْهُ نَظَرُهُ شَيْئًا, then his seeing will not be of any benefit to him at all. In the akhirah, if he did not believe and see the truth with his heart, with the eyes of the heart, then he will be flung in the fire of hell. May Allah save us from being blind of the heart. Yeah, until may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala take us with iman. I'll end my talk here. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.